Hello, I'm Deb Morgan from Not a Rehearsal, and I've got the honour and privilege of interviewing some of the authors who contributed to this incredible book, Revival, Women Embracing Their Superpowers, which was the brainchild of Sharon Brown, the founder and creator of Revival Sanctuary. I'm joined today by one of the authors, Debbie Anderson, who is a leadership and mindset facilitator at Enable Excellence. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for hosting me, Deb. Really looking forward to it.
Good. Now, you've got quite an interesting story, and I read it and I thought, this is interesting because your starting place is a place that most people aspire to. You seem to have it all. A fantastic job. You're at the top of your career working for IBM, one of the world's most well-known businesses, and you decided to give it all up.
Yeah.
What caused that? I'm interested to know.
Oh my goodness. There were a number of different reasons, but I would say the biggest reason for me was that I was already starting to reevaluate where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do, and doing the things that I was passionate about. And whilst I had that at IBM, I was passionate about learning and, the stuff that I did in terms of leadership development and, helping people to grow and develop. I got to the stage where I was just thinking to myself, can I see myself doing this for another 20 years? And as much as I've loved the safety and the security of being in the corporate world, I was institutionalized, totally institutionalized. I'd got to 45. It was actually my 45th year. And I remember thinking to myself, if I don't do this now, I never will. I'll never do it. And it was actually, I was pushed into it in some ways because I had been for a while applying for voluntary redundancies with IBM. And for whatever reason, I was never accepted. And I think it's probably because of my skill set and the value that I added. And at that point, IBM had made a decision to do involuntary redundancies. And some of my team were affected by it. And I thought to myself, some people may say you fell on your sword. I don't see it that way, because what I did is I actually chose to take up one of the spaces to volunteer for an involuntary redundancy, which sounds like a crazy thing to do. Yeah. But I decided to do it because I thought, I'm not going to get a voluntary package now. I'm not going to get the big money that I thought I might get. But with an involuntary packet, I still get a small amount of money, but it allows me to make that step into setting up my own business that I wouldn't be able to do if I just resigned. So I thought, I'm going to make this situation work for me, and I'm going to take ownership for it. I'm going to take control, and I've been looking to leave for a number of years. So let's just do it. What have I got to lose? What's the worst that can happen? And I know I actually say that in my story. Yes. So that's quite a long answer to your question, which is basically, I thought, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I thought, right, I'm going to make the situation work for me and see what happens.
Wow. I mean, that's such a huge step to take, isn't it? And when you left, was it plain sailing? Did you sort of walk out of your comfortable corporate job, set up your business, and you had clients coming in from day one? Or were there some stumbling blocks along the way?
Oh my goodness, I hadn't planned at all. Everybody says, oh yes, you need to plan ahead. And I look at it now and I think to myself, any advice that I'd give to somebody who's going from something like that to from a corporate environment or safety and security into setting up their own business, I would say, take your time. Plan it, maybe do some part-time work whilst you're growing your business, just so that you've got something there. I had nothing. I was naive in some respects because I thought I'd be able to get clients really easily. I thought I'd be able to go into associate work really easily, and it didn't work out that way at all. So it took me a long time to get used to the idea of leaving IBM. But when I left, I skipped out the door because I was ready to do it. And then I had around about 6 months, so from the July to the December, of not actually having any paid work at all. I think I had one piece of paid work, which wasn't a huge amount. And I wasn't too worried about it because I knew that I had money because of my redundancy, but we were on a budget. My husband was getting pretty twitchy. And I look back on it now and I think I probably should have actually planned ahead a bit more and thought a little bit about growing my network outside of the IBM community. So in retrospect, I would have done it differently. But when I look at it now, I think to myself, I learned a lot along that way. And I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what it's like outside of the safety and security of a corporate environment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you say one of the things you perhaps suggest people do is to take some part-time work alongside building a business, because you had to do that at one stage, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. I did a Christmas job at Morrison's, which I loved. I have to say, I loved it, and it was primarily there were two reasons for doing it. One, because I felt I needed to get out because I'd been at home for 4 or 5 months trying to grow my business, and I needed to have some human contact with people. And the other reason for doing it was because I knew that I was owed quite a bit of money from the tax office. So by getting paid work meant that I would get a tax rebate sooner through my pay packets. So that actually helped me financially as well. And so I did that. And at the same time, I was told about a temporary 3-month assignment at the Office for National Statistics, doing some work on sort of putting together RFP, so request for process type of things for vendors to provide the training service for the census, which is coming up next year, actually, 2021. And I thought, well, I may as well, I'll get the opportunity to earn a little bit of money whilst I continue to try growing my business. And that was one of the best things I did, because not only did I get to see what it was like working in the civil service, so I got an idea of, as well as sort of the public sector. So it's very, very different to the corporate world, very different. They were just brilliant because they valued what I could bring. And I ended up working there for about 1.25 years. And they gave me the flexibility to go off and do training as part of my business as well, because I was basically contracting with them. I only basically charged them for the hours that I did, so it worked out beautifully. It actually just worked out beautifully. And since leaving them in, oh my goodness, when was it? April 18. Yeah. So since then, I've been able to support myself.
That's
so
incredible.
I've not had to do any other things other than my business.
That's really incredible. I'd like to take you back, though, to the time when you were working in Morrison's, because in your story, you touch on something that I think a lot of business owners need to overcome, or do overcome, should they be in a position where they go back to part-time work. And you say that whilst you were working there, you bumped into former colleagues who were surprised to see you there. How did you overcome that?
Do you know, I think I say in my story that I've never been a snob about working. Never have been. Some people are very status driven. I'm not really. I'm not a very status driven person. And I actually quite enjoyed seeing their reaction. I remember I was working on the Christmas counter. I was doing all this stuff where I was helping people because they had their Christmas orders, and I was getting all their packs together, and I was doing all that kind of thing. And a few of them were sort of waiting for their Christmas orders, and they looked at me and I was like, what are you doing here? And I said, I've left. I left IBM, and I'm doing this just to earn a bit of money whilst I set up my business. And they're like, wow, wow, well done you. And it was really interesting to see how they had their reactions from, what on earth are you doing here, to, oh, right, okay, I think that's really admirable. Well done to you, So it was really interesting to see people's initial reactions and how you can see some of the biases that come into play with some of this, and people's attitudes about what they consider is, I guess, valuable work, or, how you view people that work in lower paid jobs. Everybody's got their part to play, and everybody does things for a reason. And, I actually quite enjoyed seeing their reactions, I have to say. Yeah.
I can imagine. And I smiled actually when I read that part of the story, because I
Mm,
thought, well, that would be really interesting. Because
mm,
you hear various small business owners say, well, I had to go and do another job whilst I
yeah,
was setting up my business, because,
yeah,
the truth is setting up a business is difficult.
it is. Yeah.
And, you've said yourself that you're now fortunate enough to be in a position where your business is supporting you. But
Mm,
how did that sort of period up until then impact things at home as well? Because you touched on it earlier. You said your husband was getting a bit twitchy.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it must have put some sort of a strain at home, surely.
Um, it didn't. It didn't. And the reason why it didn't is there are a couple of things. Is because I didn't do anything without him being fully bought into it, because
Mm-hmm.
we're a partnership. Okay.
Mm.
So it was tough in the sense that, I was the breadwinner, and I kind of plunged us from being in a very certain environment into one that was very uncertain. But I would never have done that without him being a party to it, and not necessarily agree to it, but we are a partnership, so I would
Mm-hmm.
never do anything to sort of jeopardize that. He did get twitchy, and that's because, rightly so, where's the money going to come? We've got to pay a mortgage, you know. But I also had the view that, I would always be able to find work. That might sound a bit like a dream-like naivety type side of things, but as far as I was concerned, as long as I can do a job that pays me the money that we need to pay the mortgage, I don't care what I do.
Yes.
It's about making ends meet to help me to get to where I want to be. So we'd have conversations, and I'd say to him, look, you know that I would never do anything to jeopardize us in any way. And he trusted me in that. And that takes a lot, actually. It takes a lot.
Yes.
Um, and I was able to say, look, we've never been in a situation where financially we've been in a bad place, because I think both of us we've always looked at options. We've always looked at what's available to us. And I don't care. I mean, if I was to go back to doing just an admin role in HR, I don't mind, as long as it gives me what I need to do in order to survive whilst I get to my ultimate goal. It's fine. So yeah, no, we didn't actually have a huge amount of issues. So it actually worked out well, because we talked about it, and we looked at the options. And whilst it was a bit uncomfortable for a time, and we didn't have any, money was very tight for a time, we knew that there was an end goal.
Yes. And that's what I'm hearing come through is communication.
Mm.
And by communicating your plans and what
Mm.
was and wasn't acceptable, you could
Mm.
get through that difficult time. And
Yeah,
that's absolutely admirable, because so many people say, well, this is what I want to do, and you're either with me or you're not.
yeah,
Um, and that's incredible. And you proved to him as well that you were
mm.
prepared to take any job,
Mm.
to get you through, by going to Morrison's. And of course then you
Yeah,
took the job with the ONS, which
mm.
was fantastic and gave you a whole other area of expertise and a whole load more experience in a different sector, which can only add value to what
Mm.
you do now.
Mm.
So how did you make the change from being in that place to really focusing on your business? You talked earlier of networks. You talk in your story
Mm.
about having strong networks within IBM, but
Yeah.
not really outside. So how did you go about building your networks?
Um, I spoke to people who were ex-IBM employees as well. So I used my network of people who I'm still connected with, actually, who are outside of IBM now. And there were a few people who had taken redundancy beforehand who said, right, I know a great person, or I know a great network to join, and all the rest of it. So I did that. And I got some work as a result of that. In fact, all of the work that I've got has been through my own network, funnily enough. And what I also did is I joined a local co-working community as well. So whilst that's brought me sort of more connections locally, it's just nice to have a network of people from all sorts of different areas, because you never know where that's going to take you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I joined networking groups. So Sharon's group is an example of that. So I belong to a number, about 3 different female networking groups. I belong to other sort of broader networking groups as well online, and I've got some local community groups that I network with as well. So it was just a case of just getting out there and talking to people. And a lot of the work and a lot of the things that you talk to people about don't go anywhere. So it's just being persistent and having perseverance and making yourself memorable and helping people to remember who you are if ever they have a need for something. So it's been a case of reconnecting with people who I worked with for a long time ago, but also making new connections with people as well. I don't know if that's answered your question.
No, that's great. I'm hearing that, networks are important, not just for growing your business, but actually for supporting you as a whole. We need networks across all areas of our life, and you're illustrating that that's what you've got. It's not just about business. It's just about having people there who can support you in this journey, in this adventure, if you like. And making it work for you. And you're right, it is about having conversations, because if people don't know that you exist, that you're not going to get the work. So that's vitally important. And I'm really liking your story that at the end of it, you share, I think it's 8 pieces of wisdom for people going into business. Would you like to share those with us now?
Yeah, right. I just need to look at my book.
Sorry about that.
I just need to remember where I am. Hang on, here we go. What's the worst that can happen? Here we go. Okay, so what would you like me to say? Just talk about each one in turn?
You can do. I mean, you've listed these out as part of your story, which are obviously lessons that you have learned in business. And I think they are so important to other people. I think it's worth sharing them. And you wrote them, so you can share them.
Okay. So I'll go through each in turn. So I mentioned the first one is that it's not as scary as you think. And it isn't. It is the thought of it. It's often the thought of change and the thought of the transition that you make to new things that is worse than the actual thing itself. So we end up building up these awful stories about how awful or dreadful it's going to be. So I think part of it is, it's about sort of being just recognizing you're on a roller coaster and, going for it and riding it, riding the ups and the downs. And, even though it might be a little bit fearful, a little bit scary, it's when you've actually been through it and you've come out the other end, you actually realize that you've learned a lot from it and it's not as bad as you think. So that's the first one. It's not as scary as you think. So give it a go, pushing yourself. Now, I have to push myself all the time. I'm funnily enough, actually, one thing that I'm doing at the moment, which I really don't like doing because it's not my natural thing, is marketing and self-promotion. Now, I train women and people on how to overcome unconscious biases and how to overcome the inner self-talk and all of that kind of thing. So I do need to take some of the medicine that I dish out myself. And so at the moment for me, pushing myself is doing the things that I feel really, really uncomfortable doing. But that once you start doing it, it's not as bad as you think. It's just taking that initial step. So in terms of promotion and marketing, like things on LinkedIn and things like that, I'm doing a lot more of that, even though it's, but I know that it will help me. Persistence pays. So it's all linked into persistence. And I think for me, particularly as a self-employed person in the environment that I work in, you kind of need to just keep at it, because you never know when something will come as a result of it. You might nurture a relationship for 2 years and not get anything from it. But then suddenly something changes in the business and they'll think, I know the person who can actually help us. So don't allow yourself to get too despondent when things don't happen immediately. You're kind of in it for the long haul. And if you're happy to be in it for the long haul, then, the persistence will pay eventually. Networking, we talked about networking. So it's all about having relationships. I think a lot of people fear networking because they think of it as standing very uncomfortably in a room surrounded by people with a drink in a hand and a canapé in the other and thinking, oh God, what do I got to say to this person? And I do train people on networking. And I think one thing I would say is just think of it as having conversations. Just have conversations with people. And if you can think of it in terms of having conversations, asking somebody else, what are they passionate about? Usually that opens the door and it starts the conversation flowing. So lots of networking. Focus. Now, one thing that I struggle with is focus. I am a big picture thinker. I like to generate ideas, not really interested in detail. And so I am probably the recipe for disaster when it comes to setting up my own business, because, you know, I kind of just go with it, you know, in many respects. So I do have to focus. And one of the things I have to do is just put small strategies in place every single day to help me to focus. And if I don't do that, I will find other reasons and other things to do. So, for example, with the marketing and strategies and the things that I'm doing for self-promotion, I will always be finding ways and reasons not to do that. So my focus and my strategies are to make sure that I do that. And it's as simple as just putting stuff in my diary. If I put my stuff in my diary, then I'll do it. Mm-hmm. Simple tip, really. Being patient. I've talked about persistence pays and being patient. It is being in it for the long run. If people know you, they value you, if they think that you do a great job, they will remember you. So just keep those relationships going. Stress. Oh my goodness, stress. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there are so many things that can cause us stress in our lives. But if I look back now at the stress that I have compared to the stress that I had when I was working in the corporate world, I don't have anywhere near that level of stress, because I am only accountable to me. And if I don't succeed, or if I don't do whatever I should be doing, then it's down to me. I'm not accountable to somebody else. I'm not accountable to other people's behaviours and actions. Of course I am a little bit, but it's a very different dynamic and it's a very different environment. So the stress that I experience now is much more of the eustress, the positive stress. I experience flow a lot more now than I did when I was working in the corporate world, because it's all about how I make things work for me. And it's all about linking into being happy and having fun. Because at the end of the day, we all, of course, we work to earn money, to give us the lifestyles that we want. But for me, it's about, and that was why I chose to leave when I did, which was, you know, I want to enjoy what I do. I found what I'm passionate about. I found my niche. And I want to enjoy it. I want to have fun along the way. And sometimes I think people can take things far too seriously. And you often find that you can generate lots of ideas and create new opportunities just by having fun with people and just enjoying life. So those are my tips, basically.
That's fantastic, Debbie. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me today. It's been really interesting, and it's been great to hear, you know, why somebody would want to give up that security to go out on their own. And you've, you know, illustrated that brilliantly. And with your tips at the end, it gives us more insight into why you chose to do that, which I think is wonderful. Those of you who are joining us on this interview today, if you'd like to get hold of a copy of this book, it's available on Amazon or via revivalsanctuary.co.uk. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And like I say at the beginning of my story, ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? And, you know, if you're comfortable with what the worst is that can happen, then just go for it. You never know what opportunities might come your way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.